Good morning to you, Times Radio Breakfast. It is 8:38. The protesters' animal rebellion took a fall this weekend when their plans to disrupt the Grand National were foiled by a newspaper. Protesters were planning to glue themselves together to stop the race, but the Mail on Sunday infiltrated the group and told the police. So can they dust themselves off and get back on their entirely metaphorical horse? Claudia Penna Rojas is a spokesperson for Animal Rebellion and joins us this morning. Good morning, Claudia.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm interested in why you did this. What were you planning to do at the Grand National, first of all?
Yeah, so we were there, the plan is to be there to stop the race. And this is because we care about the horses, because we love animals, we want to protect them and keep them safe. And unfortunately, with events like the Grand National, they are being put directly in harm's way. So we want to be responsible and do the right thing to stop this from happening. And this is also part of a much bigger campaign that will be taking place this summer, not just centered about horse racing, but for us to address and have bigger conversations about our broken relationship with animals and the natural world.
So what are you going to do? What sort of things have you got? I mean, you probably don't want to give me all the details because they might be stopped by police, but what sort of things do you have in mind that you're going to do this summer?
So obviously we've talked about, horse racing, but we're also looking at open liberations, rescues of animals, and a number of other tactics.
Tell us what's your concern with the Grand National? Is it jump racing over any other forms of racing? Because there are more deaths in jump racing than there are in flat racing. Is that a specific type of racing you object to, or is it all horse racing?
It's all horse racing. When we look at what we're putting these animals through, a horse dies every other race. At the Grand National event alone, 40 horses have died since the 2000s. And, we claim to love these animals and care for them. But there has to be a better way to do this that doesn't exploit them and doesn't put their lives at risk.
But I guess the argument would be they only exist. They're only bred for the purpose of racism. They're racing. There are very few wild horses, I think, in the country these days. There are very few around the world, in Europe as well. So these horses only come into existence in order to race, at which point they're fed well, they're trained, they're given places to live, they're looked after by people who care often very deeply about them. There's often a very close relationship between people and their horses. All of those things are positives, and they only happen because of this product at the end of it, this racing at the end of it.
You were saying how, these people love them and care for them. And I absolutely believe that. But I do think there has to be a better way for us to show love to these animals and putting them in a situation where they are at risk. And welfare is a cover that is used by this industry. We talk about this high welfare, that we care for them, but these horses continue to be whipped several times every race, despite extensive evidence, over 10 years of research that shows that these horses feel pain just as we would. And, as I mentioned, limbs are often broken, sometimes their necks, and then they're taken away to be shot. This doesn't seem like love to me.
But I guess the point is they wouldn't exist at all because no one's going to own a horse, or very few people will own horses unless they can be used in some way. They've become domesticated animals. They're used either for the purposes of tourism or for racing, or in some, I imagine it's relatively few cases now, for work and various purposes. So their existence is tied to their relationship to human beings. If you remove the reason for that relationship, ultimately these breeds will cease to exist.
Many people care for horses and do have them without them being raised to death. And as I mentioned, this isn't just about horse racing. This is about having a much bigger conversation about our broken relationships with animals and the natural world. And one of the things that we would love to see, that we really need to see, is actually a huge amount of rewilding that is able to happen if we make a transition away from using animals in our food system. And if we do this, we can actually free up 60% of the land that we're currently using in our food system. And this is land that can be rewilded. And with this land, we can bring back forests, wetlands, and have elk and wild horses and red squirrels, and actually create a much safer world for our children. And we can have a positive relationship with animals where they are safe and they can live out their lives as they were meant to. And I don't know about you, but to me, this seems like a much better way, a much more caring way to have these animals than putting them on a track where they will be whipped and essentially likely shot to death.
And I guess just finally on that question, that sort of utopia that you paint, that would rely on everyone saying we don't want to eat any meat or dairy products. Everyone will become vegans. And although veganism is more popular now than it ever has been, I would acknowledge that, it seems very unlikely that people either will or even should necessarily, because meat as part of a diet can be quite a healthy thing for people. We're not going to get uniform veganism. You're not going to get a world in which people don't eat meat or cheese or eggs or whatever.
Well, I feel like there's so much to address there. I acknowledge that this isn't a transition that's going to happen overnight, but you're talking about whether we should. And actually, if we look at, for example, Dr. Joseph Spoor's study, which is the most extensive study carried out into food production, and it all indicates that if we want to avert this climate crisis that we're in, if we want to build a sustainable future, the best way that we can do this is to transition away from animal products and into a plant-based food system.
Okay, and we'll see. I mean, as I say, some people are doing it. We've all just been talking about whether we can stop cows burping as well as part of that this morning. Your solution is to not have the cows, which I do understand. Claudia, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope to see some of your viewers at the Grand National on the 15th of April outside entry. In the protest, where you're going to carry on the protest. We'll see how many make it. Claudia, good to speak to you. That's Claudia Penna Rojas, their spokesperson for Animal Rebellion.